If we are, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and may I welcome you all to the annual meeting of the Thames Landscape Strategy 2021. And like so many other organisations, we are having to hold our meetings this year virtually, and I'd like to thank everybody who's joined us by this wonderful thing called Zoom, which is generously being hosted this afternoon by the National Archive at Kew. And I'd like to give a special thanks to Lee Oliver and Emily Ward-Willis of the National Archive for their invaluable help in setting this up. Now, obviously, this has been a particularly difficult year for the TLS, as indeed it has been for everybody, but hopefully we'll still be able to come back very soon and start our work again. However, the year hasn't been wasted, and a little later Jason will be telling you what has been happening in the TLS over the last 12 months. We are fortunate to have with us this evening what we hope you will find to be an interesting and highly informed group of speakers, all experts in their field. We will also hopefully be going live to the state of Virginia to hear updates on some of the exciting work that they've been doing over there. I do, however, have to tell you that our patron, Sir David Attenborough, will not be able to join us today. Sadly, David had to go into hospital this morning due to an eye problem he's been experiencing recently. And I know that he will be deeply disappointed at not being able to be here. And I'm equally sure that everybody will want us to pass on our best wishes and our hope for a speedy recovery. So David will not be missing entirely from our evening, however, as we will be showing you a video recording of the speech he gave on our 21st anniversary meeting at City Hall in 2019 at the very end of our evening. Now, just to remind you, we will have a question and answer session at the end of the evening when you'll be able to ask questions of the speakers who are with us live, and I will explain how that's going to work a little later on. Now, ladies and gentlemen, a little personal note, if I may. It has been a great pleasure, indeed an honour for me to have been chairman of the executive board of the Thames Landscape Strategy. But the time is fast approaching for me to pass the reins to a new chairman, which I will be doing later this year. So I'd like to introduce you to our current vice chairman, who will hopefully be taking those reins into what I'm sure will be a safe pair of hands. Now, Councillor Julia Neden-Watts, she represents the Twickenham ward of Richmond Council, and she's also cabinet member for the environment. And I know Julia would just like to say a few words this evening. So Julia, would you like to come in and just say a few words to everybody?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Okay, lovely. Yes, well, thank you to you, Barry, for chairing the Executive Review Board in recent times, particularly over what through this last year has been quite difficult. I'm sure we've all got much better at using Zoom and Teams and all those other things. I'm sure we're also all looking forwards to being back together and clinking glasses as we're unable to do this evening. So it's been a difficult year. I think it's important to remember that whilst we are dealing with the challenge of the pandemic, other challenges don't necessarily retreat. The climate and ecological emergency still awaits us, and that does not stop at borough boundaries or indeed international ones. And it is good to be in a virtual room with people from those other boroughs and from those other countries. All organisations will need to work cooperatively to mitigate the impacts of the emergency. And we need to focus on what needs to be done, whether that's the organisation, the volunteering, the practical work on the ground, or the governance needed to implement most effective decisions, the fundraisers, the supporters. Everyone needs to work towards that same goal. And we need to be coherent about it, to do what we can within our control, not worry too much about what we can't control, but focus on things that we're hoping to do through Thames Landscape Strategy, mitigation of flood risk, increased use of nature-based solutions to protect our areas, to enhance local habitats, and understand, crucially, the role that a healthy natural environment plays in our human well-being as well. And so that's all. That's really all that's at stake. quite a goal. Of course, we can only do and must do what's in our circle of control. And on that front, again, it's good to be in the company of other people here this evening who understand that same goal. And I look forward to making progress with our future projects to that end. And once again, thank you, Barry, for steering us to this point.
Thank you very much, Julie, and thank you for those kind words as well. And I'm sure the TLS is going to be in a very safe pair of hands come the latter part of this year. Now, if we can, ladies and gentlemen, we come to our first speaker of the evening, who is Mr. Colin Cooper of Habitats and Heritage. Colin has a long relationship with the Thames Landscape Strategy, which was one of the 3 partners that originally founded the organisation 16 years ago. Colin's going to talk about what is going on, what's going to be an exciting new arrangement between the TLS and Habitats and Heritage, and how his organisation has changed over the past year. So, Colin, you come in, please.
Thank you very much, Barry. Welcome all. Thank you for having me. So I'm going to give you a very brief update on what you will have previously known about Environment Trust and South West London Environment Network. And very excitingly, we merged later last year, or late last year. So we were formed in 2020 by the exciting merger of Environment Trust and South West London Environment Network. You've known those charities for a long while before that, Environment Trust starting in 1984 and South West London Environment Network not quite that long ago, but before that it was known as Richmond Environment Network. And the new charity, Habitats and Heritage, continues the work of both charities, but also we have aspirations to be much greater than some of our constituent parts. We've also started a new supporter scheme, and that was launched in December. And we're very excited to say that we now have 52 members and additionally 64 ET Life members who came over from the Environment Trust. So our work spans 4 different areas, largely taking forward the work that was done by the previous constituent charities, community development work. You know that the work that Swellen did around empowering and engaging friends of parts groups and mobilising communities to protect spaces that they care about. Of course, there's the heritage work, protecting, conserving, restoring our unique heritage for present, future generations. Our sustainability work, using our local knowledge to lead more sustainable lifestyles for everybody across the area that we work in. Urban greening work, led by Fran Batt, our nature conservation manager, in building better quality habitats and ecosystems and rewilding for nature and people to thrive. So I'm just going to talk about some of the projects very quickly about that we're trying to do. And here there's 2 pictures depicted. So we've got Burton's Mausoleum in Mortlake here with Leveson Wood and Emily Lunn, our heritage project manager, and also a green hub that was created by Fran. In addition to those, we're also trying to raise money for conserving Grove Gardens Chapel at the back of Richmond Hill and the Thames 8 Boathouse. In addition, Fran is also trying to create a multitude of new green hubs to link fragmented habitat across Richmond, Kingston and Merton boroughs. And that is how we're also going to be working on a new relationship, a new partnership with the Thames Landscape Strategy on their Rewilding Arcadia project, which we'll hear much more about, which is a very exciting new project. And that's how you need to get hold of me or hold of the charity, and the handles for our social media are at the bottom there. And if you've got any questions, then just put them in the chat function or send them through to Jason and we can pick them up. But thank you very much for the opportunity to just update you on Habitats and Heritage. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Colin. Thank you, Colin. And hopefully Colin will be able to stay with us. So if you have any questions for him at the end, I'm sure he will try and answer them for you. Now, as just been indicated, Jason will be talking about the Rewilding Arcadia project later. But to set that scene, we have 2 updates about the 2 strategic schemes to manage flood risk on our part of the Thames. And we're delighted to welcome Mr. Doug Hill. Doug is the flood risk champion for Surrey County Council, leading on the River Thames scheme project to manage flood risk between Datchet and Teddington. So, Doug, would you like to tell us what's going on in Surrey County Council?
It's a very quick presentation, so hopefully everyone can can see that. So I want to talk about the River Thames scheme, which is a significant and exciting piece of infrastructure that is being developed on the River Thames in the northern part of Surrey County Council. It is significant in a number of ways, because not only is it looking at protecting a vast number of properties from flooding in the order of 10,000 people, but it offers a significant opportunity to do some real good in terms of landscape, changing the landscape of North Surrey and giving some environmental opportunities. And I've got Surrey County Council here, but it is a true partnership between ourselves and the Environment Agency and the other authorities that make up the partnership. So just a picture of flooding, just to remind what we're primarily looking at. So this picture was from 2014. For those who are around the area will remember that very well. This picture is looking south from the M3, looking towards, looking around the Shepton-Spelthorne area. In that event, about 1,000 properties were affected, over 1,000 properties were affected by flooding from the Thames alone. So this is the scale of the sort of problem we're trying to tackle here. But only last month we were reminded of the risks that the River Thames poses. The River Thames came up after a significant amount of rainfall, and okay, it was a near miss, but it's sort of just a gentle reminder that the river is still there and there still is a risk of flooding. If just show you the map, hopefully everyone can see this map in terms of what the scheme is. So just give you your bearings. So Queen Mary Reservoir is that centre left. Okay. Over to the left, if I look at in terms of actually what the River Thames scheme is actually proposing, it is an engineering scheme. So over to the west of the River Thames, and you can see the dark blue, it says the Runnymede Channel there. The idea is that a new channel will be built that comes out of the river just south of Staines, works its way through the Thorpe Park Lakes, through Abbey Meads, and then enters the River Thames around Chertsey Bridge. A second channel called the Spelthorne Channel will then weave its way north through the various lakes going through that area under the M3 and making its way through to the Desborough Island. And the idea of those channels will take the floodwater and divert it away from those areas at risk. However, part of that scheme is also looking at what can we do with that water. So we can't simply dump it downstream. So there's some proposals in terms of widening Desborough Cut to allow more water to be held there and to do significant improvement works to Sunbury Weir, Molesey Weir and Teddington Weir. So it's a vast engineering scheme, but obviously with that comes massive opportunities. Just at the bottom there, I've listed the partners who are on board with the scheme, so all the local authorities there. If I move on to the next slide, just to talk about the opportunities that this scheme will give. This photo is from the Jubilee River, for those who know it. That is a flood alleviation scheme up in Maidenhead and Windsor, and it's been designed in a very natural way and provides great opportunities for sort of walking, for habitat creation. The wetland was built there. And these are the opportunities we're looking at doing for the River Thames scheme as well. So habitat creation, public access. We talked about connectivity, those sort of green links that we talked about before in the previous presentation. Carbon sequestration, some real green infrastructure there. So we're being bold and ambitious with our plans for this scheme. So just tell you what the next steps are. So obviously we've got to go through a consultation process, and we'll be starting public consultation in earnest at the end of this year. And we're very much looking at getting the ideas of what we can do to improve this area, and then working through that consultation, hopefully with Thames Landscape Strategy and other partners, all the boroughs and districts, to work out what it is we can achieve with, like I say, this sort of once in a lifetime opportunity to do something really good with the landscape around that part of the River Thames. So I'll leave it there. I'm happy to take questions at the end.
Brilliant. Lovely. Well, thank you very much, Doug. And yeah, if anybody's got any questions for Doug, we will be taking questions at the very end. I see I've already got one or two lined up anyway, but we will be dealing with all of those at the end of the meeting. Now, our next speaker is going to be Mr. James Brown. James is from the Environment Agency and has been working on the Thames Estuary 2100 project. So, James, what have you got to tell us about this highly important project you've been working on?
Thank you. I'll just share my screen, hopefully. Right, hopefully you can see that. So, So Thames Estuary 2100 plan, for those that don't know, is a long-term tidal flood risk management strategy for the Thames estuary, and it's looking to the end of the century and beyond. It covers from a tidal limit in Teddington in West London to Sheerness and Shoeburyness in the outer estuary, and it provides protection from tidal flooding using a complex network of tidal defences. This includes 9 major barriers and 330 kilometres of fixed tidal defences, and all of these defences are having to work harder as climate change accelerates. Thames estuary is an international hub of social, cultural, commercial and economic activity. It's home to 1.4 million people and £321 billion worth of residential property, as well as important infrastructure, habitats and green spaces. The activity here is continuing to grow, and the growth will not be sustainable if we can't protect it from flood risk. TE2100 sets out a long-term approach to managing this risk and was designed with climate change at its core. The plan was approved by the government and published in November 2012, and it's internationally recognised as a leading example of climate change adaptation, and it's designed to adapt to different projections of climate change and sea level rise. Although the plan enables us to adapt to climate change, it doesn't mean we can stop addressing its causes. So we'll also be taking action to address its causes, including in meeting the Environment Agency's pledge to reach carbon net zero by 2030. The plan recognises there is significant uncertainty surrounding the rate of future climate change. It addresses this by recommending that the proposals it makes are adjusted as our understanding of climate change impacts improve. To help us understand how the estuary is changing and ensure we adapt the plan appropriately, we carry out a monitoring review every 5 years and a full review and update of the plan every 10 years. We're currently working on the 10-year review, which is the first full review and update to the plan since it was developed. We recently published the results of the first stage of the 10-year review, which is the monitoring report. Some of the headline results from this are as follows. So we found that the rate of relative mean sea level rise at Southend-on-Sea has more than doubled over the last century. Fluvial flows have increased over Teddington Weir over the last 30 years, although it's currently unclear whether this is a persistent long-term change. The flood defence network is generally in good condition, but climate change is making it more challenging to maintain. The Thames barrier is currently operating reliably, but to ensure it continues to be reliable for tidal flood risk management as closures increase due to sea level rise, we will need to stop using it to manage fluvial flooding in West London by 2035. We're currently developing flood models to help us understand the potential impacts of this, and we're hoping to start looking at alternative management options with our partners and affected communities early next year. The next stage of the 10-year review of the plan is the economic case review. This will check if the plan still recommends the most cost-beneficial approach to managing tidal flood risk in the estuary. This phase is due to finish at the end of this year. In the third and final stage, we'll use the data we've gathered to work with partners to produce an updated set of recommendations for managing tidal flood risk and for delivering the wide range of the plan, which include protecting habitats and enhancing the social, cultural and commercial value of the estuary. This will form the basis of the updated Thames Estuary 2100 plan, which we aim to have ready for government approval by the end of 2022. Partnership working is going to be key to the success of delivering the updated plan. No organisation is big enough to do it alone. We'll need individuals, businesses and government to work together to create a resilient Thames estuary. So thank you for listening to my update, and if you'd like any further information, our website is detailed in the corner of the slide. Thank you.
James, thank you very, very much indeed. Very informative, and I think there's an awful lot of people who probably don't know the amount of work that's going into that at the moment. So thanks for that. And if anyone's got any questions, please let us have them, and we'll see if James can answer them at a later stage. Thank you very much. Now, as I said earlier on, the TLS has not been standing idle over the last year, despite the pandemic and successive lockdowns. So here to tell us what has been happening the last 12 months is the strategies coordinator, Jason Debney. So Jason, over to you with what you've been doing.
Hello everyone. It's good to see you all, even if it's only virtually. Usually what I do at this time is race through a couple of hundred slides and give you an update on what we've been doing over the year. But as you can imagine, this year has been very, very different. And when we went into last year, it was said to be a wonderful year for the TLS. We had all sorts of new projects and wonderful new partnerships, such as this lot here. These are people from Goldman Sachs. We also had more volunteering events than we'd had planned in a decade. We really did have a lot of volunteering work set for the year, and we had partnership events and fundraising events. We had all sorts of things that we were going to do with you lot this year, such as the summer garden party here at Princess Lowenstein's house. But on the 16th of March, exactly a year ago today, it all changed and normal life was put on hold. This is actually a picture of the 19th hole at the Royal Mid-Surrey Golf Course, which is where we were going to have our annual meeting in 2020. But exactly 1 year ago today, I sent you an email to say that it wasn't going to happen, as Boris Johnson announced to the nation that we should avoid contact with people. And the country and the river went into lockdown. And for a brief while, everything was quiet along the river. Everyday life was turned upside down. I've only been to Holly Lodge 4 times in the last year. I've spent the rest of the time working at home. It's been, I have to admit, quite lovely. We live in a little village next to the Thames. The kids have also been off school. And as a family, we've spent more time than I could have ever imagined, either on, in, or beside the river. It really has, it has been an opportunity to get to know the river through the family. But difficult decisions have had to be made. And between May and September, and again after Christmas, we had to furlough Becky because in the summer, we didn't have the events to run. And over the winter, we didn't have the volunteer work to run. But we had a brief respite in the autumn, and that allowed us to complete some fabulous volunteering work, primarily with the Swinbridge Trust. And Becky was out there almost every day, volunteering with them and doing some incredible work in Spelthorne, the Home Park, and on Desborough Island. And we were able to host some events, believe it or not, socially distanced events. And we were able to host some of those over the autumn as well. But 2020 has really been about developing new and exciting projects. And I'll talk about those in a second. But I just wanted to chat quickly about how COVID-19 has changed our parks and open spaces. And I haven't been able to find any exact figures, but I've been getting a lot of sort of hearsay of people. And this comes from Adam from Richmond Park, who estimated that 2,400 people an hour came into Richmond Park through the Roehampton Gate, which was phenomenal. And what used to take one vehicle 45 minutes to lock down the park in the summer of 2020 actually took 5 vehicles and 2.5 hours to do the job exactly 1 year later in the middle of lockdown, because of the number of people that were using the park. If you look at rubbish, Adam said that in July 2019, they used to collect 7 tonnes of litter from the park. In July 2020, they collected 42 tonnes of litter, if that is any reflection on how many more people were using the park. And things got very busy along the river. That beginning of lockdown quiet period didn't last very long. And some very difficult decisions had to be made, and certain features had to be closed down because they could not be made COVID secure. And events suffered as well. The wonderful Ganache Mandel that we host each year in Hounslow had to be scaled back completely to a very small event. And also the Great River Race, that incredible spectacle along the river to find the world traditional boat champion, that also had to be cancelled. And it doesn't look likely that that will take place this year either. And trip boats are in real trouble as they haven't been able to ply their tridal on the river. So, whilst it's fair to say that the experience has been different on different reaches of the river, we have received a lot of feedback. And the sort of things that people are saying to us is that many local people no longer use the riverside of the parks during the weekends. It's just too busy with visitors. And there are some vulnerable groups that are avoiding the river altogether and really haven't been down there for over a year now. Another phenomenon that's happened is that local people have started seeking out quieter spaces because their usual haunts are so crowded. And as they go to these more sort of quieter places, they've started to notice things that they hadn't noticed before. And that has been a real change in how people's experiences with the landscape has altered during the COVID pandemic. They're rediscovering their intrinsic connection with the natural world. Other people have told us that whilst they've discovered this rediscovered this connection with nature, they're also not able to enjoy it because the riverside was just so busy. Different experiences for different people. And then we've been told that there are other people who have come to the landscape for the first time because they had nothing else to do, and they've fallen in love with it and they want to know more about it. And then, of course, there are those people that have contacted us to see how they can help, maybe because they're unemployed, or maybe because their opportunities to get out along the river through working from home has allowed them to do so. And this has created a new project for us, which we're calling Natural Intimacy, for use of a better word. And this is about trying to create spaces where people can get close to nature and to give them the tools and the information to understand the landscape and to be able to enjoy that intimate connection with the natural world in a space that isn't crowded. And this sort of project is going to have huge benefits and will permeate through all our project work. For example, the physical and mental health benefits of it and the enhanced well-being. And it will form a major part of the Rewilding Arcadia scheme, which I will talk about in a second. But I just wanted to mention some of the other projects that we have been developing this year. The Value in Arcadia project, we're continuing to work on that. The Richmond Park Conduit House, we hope to do something with this and look at some interpretation over the coming 6 months. And also Mark Edwards has assured me today that he will have the Thames Landscape Strategy Camera Obscura tent ready for September. So it's not just Rewilding Arcadia, we've been looking at some very exciting and interesting projects. But before I move on to the Rewilding Arcadia for the last couple of minutes, I just wanted to talk about one of the sadder parts of this year. Oh, no, not the Isleworth and Brentford ferries. That is not the sadder part of this year. We're also looking at reviving the project to try and restore the Isleworth and Brentford ferries. What I was going to talk about, though, was some of the people that we've lost this year. And in the summer, we lost Anne Sayer, who is here on the left. She was one of the founding members of the Thames Landscape Strategy, and she was quite a remarkable woman. She was a British Olympian. I think she almost single-handedly launched the British women's rowing team. She was also a long-distance walker, and I believe she held the record for the fastest time walking from John O'Groats to Land's End for almost a decade. Of course, before Christmas, we also lost Fran Spencer, who is an incredible supporter of the Thames Landscape Strategy from the Hamilton's Ferry. I mean, that cheeky grin, I mean, he's going to be a character we're all going to miss from along the river. And only a couple of weeks ago, we lost Anne Partington-Omar to COVID, and that's her on the right there. And she was the chair of the London's Arcadia project, and was a massive supporter for us through her in her capacity as property manager at Ham House. The three of them will be dearly missed. So to the Rewilding Arcadia project. It's a project all about reconnecting water, people and wildlife with the natural floodplain of the Thames in response to the climate emergency for our part of the world, the stretch of river between Weybridge and Kew. And it's all about how do we adapt our floodplains in response to climate change when public perception towards the floodplain is largely that these places are managed as dry environments. People don't think of them as wet places, although we know that they are going to get wetter. The Thames is telling us that it wants its floodplain back. And that's linked to a wider phenomenon about how people have lost their touch with nature. But the COVID experience has shown us that there is a real hunger for people to rediscover that intrinsic connection with the natural world. Even now, when a high tide comes in, so you can see it with these two cars down here at Twickenham Riverside, it makes headline news. It's not headline news, it's a high tide. And yet that shows how the perceptions need to change. So David Attenborough, if he was able to make us today, would have summed that up perfectly. The Thames may be the defining natural feature of London that helps shape the identity of the capital, but the dynamic relationship between the floodplain and the people who live alongside it has gone. So we need to start planning for these changes. What is wet now is likely to get a lot wetter in the future. And we're working with all sorts of different strategic schemes and policies to try and find out how we can explain these through Rewild in Arcadia and ultimately deliver some of this policy on the ground at a community level. And importantly, what we're proposing is a nature-based solution to this, using wildlife as our guide in terms of managing the floodplain. Rewilding for us is not about reintroducing wolves or that sort of thing along the floodplain. It's about finding these natural processes to guide us. We have introduced some species, such as putting the habitat in for sand martins, and also for these cheeky little creatures, the otters. We have, as you know, put some artificial otter holts in up and down the river. Ultimately, what the project's all about is living with water, such as Bill Coley here at Richmond Bridge Boathouses. They live with water quite happily, the ebb and flow of the tides and the floods. So Rewild in Arcadia is looking at floodplain and wetland restoration. It's looking about dry routes and access. How do people move along and about the river and in the river during floods? It's looking at additional benefits such as carbon capture and filtering pollution. It's looking at how we can restore historic landscapes, how we can respect the cultural associations of the river. It's looking about long-term management, Kim's wonderful idea of the floating herd, for example. It's looking about habitat creation and reconnecting people with the natural world. It's looking at volunteering opportunities and events. How can we get people involved as we move forward with the flood risk agenda? It needs survey work. It needs monitoring. That can involve people through the citizen science. And how can what we do be used as a mechanism to build resilience with at-risk communities? All this will be done through events and activities which the TLS excels at. And of course, we'll go out to as many diverse voices as we can. We're looking at 6 key strategic sites for this up and down the river. So to sum up, we have agreement in principle from the partners on the Rewild in Arcadia project. We've carried out initial community consultation. We've worked with the catchment partnerships, and we're now looking at the funding for the education and outreach work. And we're looking towards the Green Challenge Recovery Fund and Thames Water. We're also looking at funding for demonstration projects, and the Environment Agency have indicated in principle that we've got funding through their Water Environment Improvement Fund. We're looking at the Heritage Fund and Thames Water. Only once we've done this will we start to look at implementation of the 6 sites for the rewilding projects. And we hope to take this forward in partnership with Habitats and Heritage, Swimbridge and the catchment coordinators. This shows the work that Swimbridge have carried out at Shelford St Catherine Wetland. It is wonderful work. That's all I was really going to talk about. You've got a couple more speakers after me, including our friends from Virginia. And this shows me at with the Virginian Indian Chiefs at showing our patron, the Duke of Gloucester, it's a tribute to the Virginian Indians called the Mantle at Capitol Square, Virginia. And you will hear from the Virginians, and you will also hear from a couple of the other partners who will be helping us with the Rewild in Arcadia project, such as Kieron and Elliot. Last slide, just to wish Sir David Attenborough well. I'm sure he will be fine, and it sounds like he isn't doing much. He really was hoping to be with us here today to talk about the Rewild in Arcadia. And also don't forget that if you value our work, fund us. We need every penny we can get at the moment. And you can do that by going on our website and logging into the My Arcadia website. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Jason. I think everybody realizes how passionate you are, and I think most of us are, about the Rewilding Arcadia. It is probably the most important pieces of work that the Thames Landscape Strategy has ever tried to undertake, most important project that we've ever looked at. And you know, we are really looking forward to be able to do something really fantastic with this project. So thank you very much indeed for that. Now we're going to move on to something a little different, but I think it does touch on what Jason was just talking about. We're going to hear from Elliot Newton, who's going to tell us about the Citizen Zoo programme for beaver reintroduction. So, Elliot, over to you.
Thank you, Barry. I hope you can hear me okay. And thank you to Jason for inviting me to come along and talk to you this evening. It really is a delight and great to be such among a distinguished panel. So yeah, I'm here. My name is Elliot. I'm one of the co-founders of an organisation called Citizen Zoo, which is all about trying to rewild people and places, and we sort of focus on the urban landscape, trying to rewild our urban landscapes as much as possible within the confines and challenges that urban contexts present. And one thing I've been asked to talk to you today about is our initial investigations and discussions that we're having to explore the feasibility of beavers within the London landscape, which might sound like a very surprising and ambitious thing to many, which I'd completely understand. So I just want to quickly show you a map of London. Obviously, London is a lot greener than a lot of people typically identify with 49.5% of it being green, supporting over 8 million trees, green and blue, I should say, 8 million trees. 16,000 species are said to be recorded in London, so it really is a very biodiverse place in the first place. But of course we have challenges, not least our growing population. I think London's expected population is to be encroaching 10 million people by the end of the decades. But of course, one of the biggest challenges that we're all faced, and something that the Thames landscape strategy is so focused on, and quite rightly so, is the climate and ecological emergencies that are pressing, and some of the biggest, most profound challenges that have ever faced the human race. And as has already been said this evening, one thing that is really looking how to look into is nature-based solutions to climate change. And one thing that can only be described as a nature-based solution to climate change is our amazing friend, the beaver. And the beaver, there's a lot of talk of beavers in the UK, especially over the last 5 years. We've seen the trial on the River Otter, which has recently received a lot of attention for the successful trial that's taken place there, which has demonstrated the carbon sequestration, the flood risk, the flood reduction impacts that beavers can have, and the biodiversity benefits they can have. And we're seeing these trials pop up all over the UK at the moment, which is really, really interesting. We're also seeing them in the urban context. Plymouth has just done its first urban beaver trial, which is a really interesting step, how beavers apply to the urban landscape there. And if you look across to the continent in Europe, you'll find beavers in many places, such as Bavaria. Beavers are quite a common sight in their urban landscapes. So what we thought would be a good idea is to look into some scenarios and some situations in which the beaver might be relevant to the urban landscape in London. And the first thing to recognise is that while populations of beavers are spreading, for example, in Kent, we think we now have a population of maybe in excess of 100 free living beavers, and that obviously isn't very far away. So and beavers by their very nature are a pioneering species that like to move. So it's almost inevitable that at some point in the near future, beavers will naturally recolonise our water systems. And I would say at the moment we're sort of ill prepared for such eventuality. So something that we would really look to do is how can we proactively prepare London to respond to the case when beavers might respond to our waterways, because obviously that'd be quite a big management issue and something we would very much need to be prepared for in that eventuality. The other thing we're also trying to investigate with is looking into potential fence trials like we've seen in Plymouth and in other locations across the UK. And are there areas within London's vast landmass that we could consider doing fence trials of beavers, demonstrating the ecosystem services that they can provide in a sort of local, secure environment, and also providing fantastic opportunities for people to engage with nature at a London level. Of course, beavers used to be in London. Last records were about 400 years ago, but obviously the situation has changed massively, so we have to bear that in mind. Well, of course, there are still haunts of their presence. If you look at rivers like the Beverley Brook, they were named after the beaver colonies that once lived there and moulded the flows of that river. So one thing we're proposing now, we're working with a whole host of organisations, including the Beaver Trust, and ZSL, and of course Thames Landscape Strategy and London Wildlife Trust, to investigate if it's a good opportunity, and the Environment Agency to see if it's a good opportunity for us to try and create a group which will look into a fee tier group which will look into creating a strategy and enabling lots of community engagement opportunities along the side, so we can sort of proactively prepare ourselves for beavers and also see if there could be a tool within our armoury to respond to the challenges that are front us. Things we're looking at trying to achieve is doing a pan-London ecological and socio-political mapping exercise, mapping areas where beavers might be able to live, and also looking at the social political context to see if they'd be acceptable with regards to sort of the local authorities that manage those lands. And also, as I say, preparing a framework and a toolkit for those looking to manage and potentially proactively input beavers into our landscape once again. So if you want to find out more, this is meant to be a really inclusive process. We're just at the very early stages of these discussions, but please do reach out to us at hello@citizenzoom. We'll be absolutely delighted to answer any questions you might have. And I won't show you this video now because I know we're very pressed for time. But one thing you must do is go onto YouTube and type in beaver eating cabbage, because it is one of the most cute videos you're ever going to see. But thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you this evening. And yeah, I look forward to working with you all moving in the future.
Kieron, thank you very much indeed for that. I think that's a wonderful project that you're doing there, and we look forward to beaver becoming part of our natural flora and fauna again, as it used to be. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have Kieron Knowles with us. Now, Kieron has been described as one of the most talented and relevant young playwrights of our time. And those of you who may have seen it may recall that he wrote the play about the Indian princess Pocahontas, who I think we all in the Thames Landscape Strategy know quite a lot about, and is now working on something on the rewilding of Arcadia. So, Kieron, do you want to come in and tell us what you're doing?
Yeah, hi, how's it going? I mean, that's a hell of an introduction. Thank you, Barry. Yeah, I kind of feel completely unqualified to follow all of that, and especially Elliot's one. I'm like fascinated by the beaver thing. So hello, as Barry introduced me there, I'm a playwright. I've kind of been obsessed with rewilding over the last 2 years, and I've read every book that I can get my hands on. And that all started really from a post that I saw on Jason's Facebook, where he spoke to Extinction Rebellion. And he mentioned that he was talking to them about rewilding Arcadia, and I said that that's probably the best title for a play that hasn't been written ever, and so I kind of got in touch entirely to try and steal his title for his project. But anyway, it's sort of led to a lot of very interesting conversations, especially during the last year, where we've seen such an effect both on the arts and obviously the community projects like this and kind of the wider world. And so I've kind of come up with the idea that rewilding Arcadia will be a reaction to the relationship that we as humans have with the with rivers over the next 30, 40, 50 years. And I'm going to do that in the shape of a play, but also bring in elements of other artistic strands. So I'm working with a band called Megson, who are a folk band, and they are writing original music for this piece. And also I'm working with an artist called Sofia Semensky, who's going to create a set and sort of some artwork that goes, visual art that goes with it as well, because I kind of feel like just as a river is an ecosystem, the artistic world is also an ecosystem, and it's a lovely metaphor about our changing relationship with rivers if we can kind of create a really knotted, interreliant piece of art. And so I have been discussing this with Jason, and the idea is that at some future point, hopefully this year, maybe next year, depending on all these government guidelines, but that we would perform a piece on the banks of the River Thames about our changing relationship with the water. And this will take the shape of several different storylines that run through from different perspectives. So, for example, Megson's piece is going to be about a young couple who buy a house that they then find is uninsurable, and it's the relationship with the place that had so much promise for them, which ends up becoming something they're cursed with. Obviously, this is dependent on funding, so we're going to go for some Arts Council funding, but Arts Council are very much fans of matched funding bids, and so it's something that we're hoping to kind of find some sponsorship for to make sure that everybody's paid equitably, especially coming out of a year where a lot of people have seen their income disrupted. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to first of all be on this chat, but also to be working towards something that is sort of an optimistic look at how we can still change our behaviours and change our relationships with rivers, and how that is a sort of massively relevant and current conversation that we should be having. So yeah, that's it in brief, but I'd love to take any questions later if people have them, but thank you for having me.
Kieron, thank you very, very much indeed. And it's great actually to see the natural world meeting the arts and coming together to do something like that. That's brilliant. Thank you very much for coming with us this afternoon. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we now hopefully are going to cross over to Virginia to hear from some of our American partners. We'll hear about some of the initiatives that they've been working on. And so I'm going to first of all try and welcome Leighton Powell. Leighton, are you with us?
I am.
Good, nice to see you this afternoon. Now, Leighton is the Chief Executive of Scenic Virginia, which is a partnership established to preserve the scenic landscape across the state of Virginia. So, Leighton, welcome, and would you like to tell us what you're doing over there?
I would love to. Thank you so much. And hello, river friends. I'm delighted to be here today. I think some of you know that our partnership with TLS grew out of our work to preserve the view that named Richmond, if you can see this. And that's our capital city's iconic panorama that is so strikingly similar to your view of the River Thames from Richmond Hill. Our work continues, and despite numerous disruptions caused by the ongoing pandemic, I'm pleased to report several exciting updates. First, it's exceedingly likely that the view will be saved. A partner land group has been diligently working to acquire the riverfront parcel that sits in the viewshed, and we are extremely hopeful for a great outcome. The hundreds of hours that Scenic Virginia has spent to preserve our view became the impetus for a new program called the Virginia Viewshed Project. We want to use the lessons learned here as a cautionary tale for other Virginia localities, to encourage them to think now about what scenic resources they most love and to begin enacting a plan to preserve them. To that end, in late 2019, a local Richmond foundation awarded Scenic Virginia a $50,000 challenge grant for the project. Despite fundraising challenges caused by the pandemic, we secured the $50,000 match in 2020, giving us now $100,000 to begin the project rollout to Virginia's localities. One result of the Viewshed project will be a brand new register of Virginia's most valued views and vistas. I'm very pleased to report that we're working to secure the view that named Richmond as the register's first designated viewshed. We're also working with the City of Richmond on the creation of an overlay district for the view that will guide other development in the area. We hope to use the resulting scenic overlay as a model in other localities. Finally, last summer, we were asked to write a chapter about scenic resources for a new book called Vibrant Virginia. We included a brief mention of our work to preserve the view and the resulting partnership that developed with TLS. The editors read it, loved it, and asked us to elaborate. We happily complied, and the book is scheduled for publication in July. So thank you for having us, and we cannot wait to be together in the not too distant future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Leighton, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. And it's lovely to hear what's going on over there, and long may our relationship continue. I think we're doing great things together. Thanks a lot, Leighton. Nice to see you. Now, our next guest is Rick Tatnel. Now, Rick first visited, I think, TLS some 20 years ago, and has been a close friend of our organization ever since. Rick's latest project was born from the Pocahontas events that the TLS hosted in Science Park in 2017. So, Rick, what have you got to tell us this afternoon?
Well, Barry, I thank you for the introduction. I'm just so glad and honored to be a part of this conversation. And as you mentioned, I was thinking back, it is 20 years next year when I first became involved and aware of the Thames Landscape Strategy as a part of in 2002, Jason had a picture from earlier from that event, which celebrated the 100th anniversary of y'all's preservation of the view from 1902. And that was my first introduction to the Thames Landscape Strategy. I met Jason, got to meet Kim Wilkie, and started to really understand the power of your organization. I was so struck by the 100-year plan that y'all came up with, because that's really the timeframes that we need to be looking at, is the long term, and that's been presented earlier today. And as Barry mentioned, we had an opportunity in 2017 to come over as a part of the Pocahontas 400 event with Leighton and Ellen LeCompte and others in Richmond. We've been very involved in the Richmond to Richmond connection, and that trip started out as a Richmond to Richmond connection. We had students from our Franklin Military Academy that acted as a guard of honor at the event that Barry mentioned at Sign House. With the Duke of Gloucester and the Virginia Indian tribes, the chiefs, and that was powerful. But we also had connections with Great Court School in Ham that was a part of our plan, and the students stayed with families in Great Court, and it was intended very much to be another Richmond to Richmond connection. And then Pocahontas kind of came into the mix, and in Gravesend, it's wonderful that we're having this event this week. On Sunday is the 404th anniversary of the funeral of Pocahontas in Gravesend at St. George's Church. And on this day 4 years ago, we were, I think, getting ready on the plane to fly to England to be a part of that event. And what we realized was that the power of Pocahontas and her life example as a hope and purpose was still very relevant and powerful today. And as I came back, and really ever since, I've been working to expand the power of her legacy and to get people to be more involved in their community. 400 years ago, she was met with diseases, new people coming in, economic and social strife, a lot like what we're dealing with in 2020 and what's happened over the last year. And we see her as an example to people to change the world. One of the elements of the Pocahontas Project, which has come out of this, is that we're trying to get people more involved in their community and in their environment. And we support and have been very engaged with programs that the United Nations has come up with. We're trying to get people involved in that. And recently, if y'all might be aware, the United Nations came out with a plan called Making Peace with Nature, which fits very much with many of the things that have been said today. And if we're going to get over these climate issues and our environmental issues, we need to get everybody to be more involved in the process. And I think that the Thames Landscape Strategy, along with what they've been doing with folks in our Richmond area, including the James River Park System and the James River Association, are really examples of the kind of work that needs to be happening around the world. And rivers are the focus of our future. Rivers and streams, they're the lifeblood of humanity. And so we've got a program called Faith in Our Rivers that we're promoting to get people more involved in the community and in the rivers and in the watersheds and in their environment. And we look forward to being a partner with the Thames Landscape Strategy in this, and showing the world that the work that y'all are doing is so powerful and important, and that we need to be thinking 100 years in the future. And I appreciate all of the efforts that Jason, who just become a really good friend, and he's been over here and I've been over there, and y'all are really lucky to have him, and we're very excited to continue to partner with the Thames Landscape Strategy. So I appreciate the time, Barry.
Thank you very much indeed, Rick, and we very much appreciate your time and the input that you put into our organisation as well. So thank you very much for being with us this afternoon.
Thanks.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, we now come to Mr. Mike Burton. Now, Mike is works at the river, or the James River Park system, and the parks have restored and opened up a series of open spaces along the James River that were once in sort of almost a semi-derelict state to create one of the most exciting park systems, I think, currently in the USA. So Mike has visited us twice before over here and met many of our friends and colleagues. So Mike, what are you going to update us on this afternoon?
Greetings from Virginia. My name is Michael Burton. I work for the Parks and Recreation Department here in the city of Richmond. Thank you for the invitation to be a part of this. Jason had asked if I could give a brief update on the James River Park system. And spoiler alert, the pandemic plays a big part in this story. But we, last spring, early summer of 2020, we were in pretty much full lockdown mode here in Virginia, and especially in the city of Richmond. The governor had issued stay-at-home order. All the schools were closed. Many businesses were closed. Restaurants were closed. Bars were closed. The park was one of the very few places that did stay open throughout the entirety of the pandemic, and you know, never closed. And the park truly became a refuge for the citizens of Richmond. You know, getting out for exercise was one of the few things that the governor's stay-at-home order did allow, and the park is really where people came out and took advantage of that. We saw the increased usage in our visitor numbers. We recorded over 2.3 million visitor counts for 2020, which is the highest number we've ever had. But even more so, we could look at year-to-year comparisons from previous years to 2020, and we saw, you know, marked increases during the months where the restrictions were at their harshest, if you will. So it was, you know, we were proud that the park could play such an important role for helping people get through the pandemic. And I don't know that I have time really to go into specifics on, you know, kind of protocols and what we did to stay open, but I will be on the call. So if people have any specific questions about any of that type stuff, I'll be happy to try to answer them. Another success story we had this past year, we managed to pull off the publication of a coffee table photography book, all photographs of the park. We partnered with a local photographer and worked with our Friends of group, and we were able to get the book published right in time for Christmas. So we pre-ordered 1,000 copies of the book, and to our delight, they all sold quite quickly. So we managed a nice and almost a $30,000 fundraiser project. So that was another success story. And I'm going to kind of wind up talking, but I will, following this, I will share a number of photographs, and they all are from this book. So thanks for the time, and hopefully we can get together in person one of these days. Hopefully things will get back to some version of normal soon. So take care, everyone. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Mike, and I'm sure we all share that sentiment. It's good to hear that. I think you've been experiencing the same thing over there as Jason was talking about, and about the use of open parks and open spaces during what's been a pretty awful time for everybody. So thanks very much indeed for that. And we're going to try and keep Mike online if we can for the Q&A session at the end of this. We're now going to welcome two more of our friends from Virginia. We have Chief Steve Adkins of the Chickahominy tribe, and Chief Ann Richardson, Chief of the Arapahoe tribe. from the state of Virginia. Since they were last with us, the tribes have been granted official US federal recognition, which has made a phenomenal difference to their position in the American society. So you're both very, very welcome. And what have you got to tell us this afternoon? I'm sure it's going to be exciting.
Okay, can you hear me? This is Stephen Adkins.
Hi, Stephen. We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, and I tried again on my video, so again, you probably, it's probably great for you that you can't see me. But I do bring you greetings from a macro level, the land that we call Turtle Island, which is the United States. And from a micro level, I bring you greetings from Seneca, and that's the land that the Eastern Woodland Indians have resided in for millennia. And I do welcome the latecomers to these environmental concerns, and it's not, and I'll say that from the perspective that from time immemorial, Native people have looked to preserve the earth for 7 generations, and that's a mantra by which we still live. I'm glad the rest of the world is catching up, because as Jason so adequately stated, we can't afford to turn a blind eye or a deaf ear to the realities of the environmental situation in which we find ourselves. And I concur with him that it knows no continental boundaries. This is a world situation. It's an earth situation that we face, and we must employ to the best of our ability those tools of environmental stewardship that are available. But to tell you some of the things that are going on with the Chickahominy tribe, we have set up an environmental protection office. We're funding that office, and we're going out proactively looking at those things that we can deal with, those knobs that we can turn to improve the environment. We acquired 106 acres on the James River, and we have named it Chickahominy on the Powhatan. The James River was referred to as a Powhatan River before the invasion of 1607, so we call it the Chickahominy on the Powhatan. And we're looking to conserve it, we're looking to preserve it, and help it, retain its natural beauty. We're looking to do some eco-friendly tourism on that property, which might involve building longhouses or uhakins. And the term over on this side of the pond is glamping, where people will kind of glamorize camping, but we're going to have facilities that will attract people to come and stay overnight and get on the water and travel to other venues in Charles City County along the James River. So our thrust is really to conserve that property for generations to come. You referenced the sovereign status that we've attained from the federal government. The Treaty of 1677, which is ultimately called the Articles of Peace, or the Treaty of Middle Plantation, deemed my tribe, the Chickahominy, and the Rappahannock tribe, among others, as sovereign subjects of the Crown. That sovereignty was set aside when the United States was formed, and on January 29th, 2018, the president signed a document, Public Law 115-121, which granted or restored the sovereignty that we had enjoyed and that we were enjoying when the colonists landed on May 14, 1607 at present-day Jamestown. So it was great to get that recognition. The support we have gotten from some of the folks within Parliament toward our efforts to gain sovereignty. My thanks to the folks there, and Jason and others had been very active and interested in the outcome, looking for a positive outcome, and it was realized. So we do enjoy that sovereignty that we enjoyed all those years ago. We are looking to acquire another piece of land on the Chickahominy River, and we plan to have boating excursions from one site to the other. And both of those sites would have camping facilities. A lot of our friends in Europe love to come over and kind of, you know, get with nature, come out and camp and learn some of the oral history that our people are more than happy to share. Some of the negatives that have impacted the Chickahominy tribe as well as other tribes within the Commonwealth of Virginia. We've had a long-standing powwow and fall festival, and some of your folks were able to attend a powwow back in 2007. We had to suspend that. The powwow last year would have been the 70th consecutive. Now, we've had powwows for many years. There was an interruption during World War I and World War II. So we had to suspend that powwow and fall festival. We're looking to restart that, and hopefully at some point you folks can come over and share that experience with us. But again, I'm really pleased to be here today with you folks. I'm really engaged in what you're doing with the Thames landscape strategy. And I look forward to a continued relationship with you folks, and I'd like to take it to a higher level. We're looking to do some fish restoration, working with Virginia Commonwealth University Rice River Center, especially on the sturgeon project. So stay tuned. There are some things that we'll be engaged in that I think will really attract your interest and support. And I'm looking forward to traveling to your part of the world again and reconnecting with some of the friends that I've established over the years. So again, thank you for this time.
Thanks very much indeed, Chief Steve. Chief Anne, do you want to add something?
Yes, hi, how are my friends over in the UK? Good to see you, Leighton and Ellen, good to see you as well. This pandemic has kept everybody isolated so that we can't get out, but we've been doing a lot of work even as a result of it. The work that we've been doing on the Rappahannock River has to do with cultural preservation as well as environmental preservation. Dr. Julie King with the University of Maryland and her archaeological team has been mapping historic towns for the tribe and excavating there and finding and researching, finding out all kinds of wonderful information that we did not know. And so that has been one of the projects that we have delved in until after we got recognition. And also we have our environmental services program set up now. And Mr. Woody Walker, who is here with me, is running that for us. And he has done a fantastic job of looking at climate change and how it affects the Rappahannock River. The Rappahannock River is known for its oysters and its striped bass. And so we don't want anything to happen to those. Our herring have already kind of left the river to a large degree. And one of the projects that we're working on now is to return the herring population back to the river and restore that. So we're working on that. And then working also on the impact that climate change has on the tribe in its current location. So we are on the ridge between the Mattaponi and the Rappahannock River, and it has affected both the fish that migrate up into our area, as well as the birds that now stay here, and the birds who come from the north here impacted by climate change in a number of different ways. But we are working to preserve what we have and trying to get land on the river. We have one portion of land on the river. Now we're working with U.S. Fish and Wildlife to get another piece of property on these iconic cliffs that you see behind me. I think the Smith made them or referenced them as being like the cliffs of Dover. So this diatomaceous earth that is on the cliffs that you see behind me has made them white. And he encountered the tribe in 1608 when he came up the river at this location, and we had 3 historic towns on this 2,000 acre parcel of land called the Fawns Cliffs. So we are working with them, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, to preserve these cliffs as much as possible. We already had some development that took place there, some damage that really washed the diatomaceous earth out into the river, caused the face of the cliff to fail and cause devastation in the river. And so we can't let anything happen to our Rappahannock oysters because they're the best in the world. And so we work really closely with the conservation agencies, also state agencies for the wildlife, refuge that's there, and trying to protect the aquatic life in the river. So we've been very busy doing those things, and really just wanted to take a moment to thank Jason, our friend, Lord Watson, and His Royal Highness for their support in trying and pushing through the federal recognition for the Virginia tribes. It was a historic moment. We are celebrating our 100th anniversary this year of our incorporation as a tribe with the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so it was very important that we have this status at this time to show that the survival and the fight for survival was victorious, and largely because of our support from the UK. And so I would just like to thank all of our friends there for supporting our recognition and helping our tribes to be restored back to the sovereign status, as Chief Adkins referred to earlier. Very important for us to be able to protect our tribal lands and be able to protect our cultural resources as well. So I just wanted to say hello to all of my friends and update you a little bit on what we've been able to do since the last time we talked. If you have any questions, I'll be around. So take care and stay safe.
Thanks very much. And thank you very much to Chief Steve and to Chief Anne for taking the time to be with us this afternoon. It's wonderful to hear what's going on over there, and we are so pleased that things have worked out so well as far as federal recognition is concerned, and we hope that we will be able to maintain our association for a long time to come. So thank you very much for being with us this afternoon. Now, ladies and gentlemen, maybe go on. We have with us this afternoon Janina Ramirez. Now, Janina is patron of the Father Thames Trust, who are very important colleagues and associates of the Thames Landscape Strategy. And Janina, you're very, very welcome to be with us this afternoon. I know it was a bit touch and go earlier on in the day, but you're most welcome. We'd love to hear what you got to say.
Well, it's an honour to be with you all today. Jason approached me last year, maybe the year before. It feels like the years are blending at the moment, to be involved with the Thames Landscape Strategy and Father Thames Trust. And I am really here as a stand-in for Sir David, but no one can replace him. I first became involved, as I say, through being asked by Jason, but my relationship, if I can bring us back from the other side of the ocean to the Thames, my relationship with the stretch of Thames covered by the Thames Landscape Strategy began very young. Two major moments happened for me along the stretch that's protected. So firstly, at Hampton Court, when I was 7 years old, I walked through the area from the Great Kitchen towards the Great Hall and crossed a threshold, a step that was completely worn down by the passage of people's feet. over hundreds of years. And that was the moment at the age of 7 that I realized that time telescoped before my eyes, that I was passionate about studying the past and human relationships with the past. The other major moment in my life was when I was 14 and my parents gave me permission to go on the train into London by myself for the first time. And I chose to go to Kew Gardens, and I took my little painting set and I sat and I painted flowers for hours at Kew. And that was the moment I realized a passion within myself for the relationship between art and nature. And today, I'm a cultural historian. I work at the University of Oxford teaching art history, but I also work for the BBC making documentaries about art, heritage, history, culture, and the relationship with the landscape. So my involvement with Thames landscape strategy came from 2017 when I was asked to make a documentary for the BBC on, it was called In Search of Arcadia. And I managed to discover the great culture and heritage of that stretch of river. It's wonderful hearing from Chief Richardson and Chief Adkins about the importance of the river in relation to in its relationship with culture and heritage, and that's something that along the Thames is also so important. So many sites are precious in terms of their relationship with this classical ideal of the Arcadian peace and harmony. So, for example, I managed to get inside Alexander Pope's grotto, and that was such an experience to think that it's probably the first museum of geology. And there, Pope surrounded the walls with examples of stones from all over the world that he collected, brought together, and turned into this wonderful curiosity on the banks of the Thames. We've got Marble Hill, we've got Ham House, and Richmond Hill, of course, has loomed very heavy. And I want to reflect on something that Julia Neden-Watts said right at the beginning, which is that an ecological emergency awaits us. And that is pressing. It is pressing for all of us at the moment. But when I made that documentary, I had the honour of sitting on the bench on Richmond Hill, looking out over that scene that Turner painted in 1820. And with Kim Wilkie and with Sir David Attenborough, I had this moment of timelessness. And that is part of what we are trying to achieve, I think, all of us collectively together, that we want to protect this stretch of river, this important bit of our heritage, but also the natural world. And as a cultural historian, I'm fascinated by human creativity, but I only ever think about it in relationship to the natural world and the landscape. There is nothing unless we work together and in harmony, and that is our goal going forward. So anything you can do to help the Thames Strategy Landscape with the Father Thames Trust, it is so needed right now, especially as we're living at a time when nature really has shown us what it can do. We need to plan not just for next year, but for 100 years down the line. Thank you so much.
Janina, thank you very, very much for being with us this afternoon. And we are very, very, very happy to be associated with Father Thames Trust. It's very important to us, and long may that continue. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you. Let us start some questions here. Now, I got the first question here is from Simon, and it's could you please also tell me who this is directed to? Because at the moment, I don't know who it's directed to. But the question is, with the Thames being used more and more by paddleboards, kayak, and wild swimming, etc., is there anything we should be doing to maintain a balance of nature and human use? So it was, I don't know who might want to answer that one.
I'll jump in. I think it's what we do the whole time. Thames Landscape Strategy is all about finding, presenting that 100-year vision that Kim wrote 25 years ago about trying to find a way forward that marries together the human use, the wildlife, the recreational use, the cultural associations, absolutely everything. And I think I showed a slide of the 360 paddleboarders in Richmond earlier, right at the beginning of lockdown, and I think it is the fastest growing recreational pursuit on the Thames. So it's an incredibly important part of the future for the river.
All right, thank you very much, Jason. If anyone does have, I'd be grateful if you can let me know who it's directed to. We got another question here from Peter and Marilyn, and they're asking, how about including the seeding wells filter beds in Surbiton in the TLS rewilding project? It's a sink at risk at the moment and in a terrible state, but has huge potential for biodiversity. Who would like to answer this one?
The Royal Borough of Kingston's ecology officer, possibly. I don't know. It is something which we would love to be part of it. The strategy has some very clear goals for it. It's a site which the Thames Landscape Strategy has been used successfully over the past 25 years to fight off development. I think the first planning application that came in for that, for 600 houses, then it came down to 400, then 300, then I think it was 30 floating houses. So we've had a long history with the site, and it would be good. How we get it in the first stage, I don't know, because we need to get through these demonstration projects. So I don't know who asked the question, but if you want to email me, we can talk about it after the meeting.
Okay, thanks, Jason. I've now got a question from George. I think it's as much as a comment as anything else, but the Queen's Promenade is very busy in the weekends with lots of visitors, but there are boats parked by the side for weeks in a state of in an untidy state, and dogs cooped up on the boats. Please note, Doug Hill of Surrey County Council, please can you do something? Doug, I don't know if you've got an answer to that one.
It's not my area of influence, so I can take it away and pick it up with my partner authorities. I think it's in Kingston rather than Surrey, but I can pick it up with my colleagues in another authority.
If I can jump in on that one, there seems to be a lot of questions about Kingston at the moment. If there are any councillors from Kingston there, we do have a lot of support in Kingston, and we would love our funding back from you.
That was a bit of a knock, Jason. Thanks very much.
That's okay.
Right, I've now got a question from Robert. I'm starting to feel slightly targeted close to the river in Twickenham with an engineering scheme upriver aimed at speeding the movement of water downstream, the common consequence of which is simply to move the flooding to the downstream end of the scheme and the barrier downstream, talking of not protecting our area from fluvial flooding after 2035. Surely the better environmental way of controlling upstream flooding is to slow the flow upstream rather than speed it downstream. What is the predicted impact of the upstream scheme on river levels and flood risks in our area? Quite a long question. Who wants to answer this one?
I can answer that.
Come on then. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good question, and I suspect when we go into the consultation for the scheme, that's exactly what those downstream of the scheme would want to know. I think firstly, I could say we as Surrey County Council wouldn't support a scheme that would increase river levels downstream. So that's the first thing I'm going to say. Secondly, the modelling that we have to do for planning will show that there is no downstream impact of the works, but that will come out in more evidence of that will come out in the planning, I should say. But like I say, we wouldn't support a scheme that would increase flood risk downstream. And secondly, your point about the environmental benefits of slowing the flow, actually, I completely agree with you. However, I don't think in that sort of time scale we would be able to do anything that protected that many properties in that part of the Lower Thames. So for me, it's a combination of the two. And I think the Environment Agency, there's another question in the chat as well, which asks a similar question around the environmental benefits of slowing the flow in the wider catchments. The Environment Agency are starting to promote a scheme that does exactly that. And we as Surrey County Council in our strategy are looking at things like water butts, attenuating that surface water flow before it even gets into the river. So that really does improve things downstream. But for me, that part of the Thames, it requires both, probably.
Right, thank you very much. I've got a question here from Claire. Interesting question. Question for anyone who knows the local area. Where do you think is the best place for a pedestrian cycling bridge across the Thames, bearing in mind the fact that most of the land is metropolitan land? Interesting question. Who wants to try and pick that one up? We're meeting silence here. Jason, have you got an answer to this one? Or Surrey County Council, have you got an answer to this one?
Pedestrian bridges, I mentioned about the reintroduction of the ferries, and that is something which we do want to pick up on over the next couple of years and look at the reintroduction of the Isleworth and possibly the Brentford ferry. I believe that the Kew Gardens were working with Hounslow Borough Council looking at the possibility of a new footbridge between Kew at the car park, Old Queen Elizabeth Lawn, and Ferry Point in Brentford. So there was a possibility there. And then there's always been a group that's looked for a new connection across the river up the Queen's Promenade between the Home Park and Queen's Promenade and Kingston. Then, of course, the London Borough of Richmond have carried out some work looking at the possibility of a new connection across the river between Ham and Twickenham. So there are different organisations and agencies that are looking at the potential for improving the cross-river connections.
Okay, thanks very much indeed, Jason. Now, I think we've just got time for two very quick questions, and I mean very quick questions. And the first one is from Suzette, who who wants to know, and I think this is for you, Elliot, by the look of it. Do you think the London population will increase as expected? Aren't people leaving because the pandemic has made them think differently? Elliot, we've got an answer for that one?
Well, it's a very complex sort of thing trying to sort of predict population flows, but I imagine we have seen significant people leaving London and living into the countryside, but I imagine London being the place that it is, once we start to emerge from COVID, we will start to see population expand, and I would be confident that in that 10 million estimate, to be honest. But yeah, I'm more on the ecology side of things and the sort of sociology, sort of demographic side of things, but that's my general impression of it anyway.
Right, lovely. Thank you very much indeed, Elliot. I just had a message in from Vivian. Vivian is, I know, a Spelthorne councillor, and she says that Spelthorne is working to support Sunbury community for a new ferry across to Elmbridge. So part of the answer, I think, to the previous question. Now, I can only take this last question now, and it's from Sam, and his question is for Jason. I love what's being done with Thames landscape strategy. The Arcadia plan is difficult. I live nearby in Twickenham. I was wondering if there is any opportunity to get involved.
Yes, email me. If you go on our website, my email is on that, or phone me. My telephone's on our website as well. Just Google Thames Landscape Strategy and you'll get there.
Lovely, thank you, Jason. Now, I'm sorry, everybody. I know there's some more questions there, but time, unfortunately, has caught up with us, and it is sadly brings us to the end of the Thames Landscape Strategy Annual Meeting for 2021. And I'd like to thank all of our speakers for taking the time this afternoon to be part of our meeting and to answer your questions. A big thank you, of course, to the National Archive at Kew for hosting the meeting, and to Lee and Emily for doing all the technical stuff, as they say, not just this evening, but I know they've also put in a lot of work in the last few weeks to put this thing together, make sure it all works on the night. And of course, a big thank you to Jason and Becky. Becky's unfortunately not been able to be around too much, as Jason said earlier on this evening, over the last year. But thank you for all your hard work. I know Becky's itching to get back and doing some work on her projects. And I hope we can look forward to meeting in person next year for our annual meeting. And we are going to leave you with the recording of Sir David Attenborough's address to our 25th anniversary meeting at City Hall in 2019. So from all of us here at the Thames Landscape Strategy, thank you for being here. Lovely to see you, and good night.
There's not much left to say, of course. But actually, we're in the witness of a miracle. It really is a miracle. 25 years ago, a young landscape architect at the beginning of his career decided entirely off his own bat that he was going to spend a lot of time and a lot of thought and a lot of research to draw out the plans for a strategy to look after the Thames as a unit, at least the upper part of it. Nobody's done that before. I mean, the rivers are things that divide us for the most part. Rivers are the place where you stand on it and look on the other side and glare at your neighbor and argue about who goes up and who goes down and who has rights to what. So it was an extraordinary vision, and we forget that. Now, if we do forget it, we're in trouble, because it needs cherishing. We're talking now as though it was just natural, it was bound to happen. It wasn't bound to happen. And the other miracle that happened, a partner in this miracle, was Jason, as has already been mentioned. Where did he come from, and how did he decide that he was going to spend 25 years, 25 vivid, vigorous years, working, persuading people to give money? And that's the third miracle. It costs money, this. Councils have to be socially responsible for spending money. And are they going to spend money on just a notion? 25 years ago it was by no means certain, by no means certain. And there have been rocky times in the last 25 years in which people along the banks were, with proper responsibilities, thought maybe it wasn't worth it. We're talking now, looking back at the 25 years, as it was a simple achievement. It wasn't. It was really tough. And there are a lot of people here, Kim one, Jason another, and many of you will know that we went through some very rough passages. Ladies and gentlemen, they haven't come to an end. They're going to be rough passages ahead too. We're going to come to councils and organizations and up and down the river saying, please keep your support. Please keep on giving some money. This is a unique achievement. This is a cooperation, the like of which I can't find anywhere else. It's a great achievement. It is, as I say, a miracle. And may I, on behalf of the citizens who live up and down that river, thank you very much for the support that you've given them. Thank you.